Great Lakes. I'm looking at your long history of lobbying for oil and gas stakeholders and the fact that you've even litigated against the Interior Department on behalf of private interests. And in 2001, as the Director of Congressional and Legislative Affairs at Interior, you reportedly modified scientific data from the Fish and Wildlife Service to obscure findings that oil drilling could negatively impact wildlife. So I'm very concerned. We count on scientific information to protect the lakes, to know what we ought to be doing to protect the lakes as well as our land and air. So, how do we trust you to preserve scientific integrity and manage public resources for Americans, given your history?
Well, thank you for that question. I did not modify scientific data, but I appreciate the question. And before I enter into it, I'd like to tell you, I have a 2520 Parker pilot house boat that sits on the Chesapeake, and if I'm not at work, I'm out there on it. So I love water and fishing too. But that said, I think that it's important for me to convey two things to you. First, I wasn't involved. I was not the person that modified any data, but I want to tell you how I go about making decisions with science. And perhaps the best example, and it may not make everyone on the committee happy, but perhaps the best example is the process that Dirk Kempthorne and I went through to ultimately make the determination of whether or not to list the polar bear. And the reality is that when a listing decision was about to be made, at least in a proposed regulation, I looked at the record as a lawyer, and I said, this record's pretty weak. We might be able to go left or right, whatever the Secretary wants to do. And the Secretary made a decision at that moment to ask the U.S. Geological Survey to do more research. And they spent a year doing research. And they brought that research back to the department. So we get to the next year. And that obviously meant, as a lawyer, there's more information to analyze. And Secretary Kempthorne went through that information incredibly carefully. He reached his own conclusions on that information, which may not be the same conclusions that all of you would reach. But I spent days working with the people who developed the data. And once he made the decision to list the bear as a threatened species, then I looked at the law and said, okay, if that law is the Endangered Species Act, we've used science, he's made his decision, how can we line up things in the law in a harmonious way to reduce conflict? And he did that as a matter of law. So we look at the science, then we apply the law, and we have to learn the science, we have to understand it, we don't manipulate it. If we're going to use data, we should say why it's one person's versus another. But we look at the law with the science as an informational base, and then we make a legal determination. And as long as we connect the dots, that we've looked at that, we've evaluated it, and we've dotted our I's and crossed the T's, those decisions are going to be upheld, and they're going to be upheld legally. And that is the process. If I might,
just because I apologize,
Sure.
because I'm running out of time, I just want to follow up and say, so you're indicating you will honor the agency's professional scientists, regardless of political agenda. I mean, we are in, as you know, a whole different world where never thought we'd have to have a march for science. Let's march for facts. I mean,
Right.
It's kind of a strange world that we are in right now. But the reality is that scientists and science are under attack throughout the administration. And so are you saying that you will honor the professional scientists and what they recommend based on scientific facts?
Well, I would say first that I'm certain that the scientists at the Department of the Interior are not under attack, number one. Number two, I will take the science, I will look at the science, and you take the science with all its significance and its warts. And you look at that, you evaluate it, and then you look at the legal decision you need to make. And in some instances, the legal decision may allow you to consider other factors such as jobs. In other instances, it might not. But you've given us whatever that standard is. We're going to look at it and apply the law and be honest to the science. Dale Hall, the director of the Fish and Wildlife Service, while I was there, said to this committee in a letter, my scientific, I have never, my integrity on science is unquestionable, and that is the fact.
Thank you.